I'm president of the JEFCO Association for Gifted Children. Welcome to the JAGC sponsored candidate forum from the 2018 Jefferson County School Board election. And also with me and moderating is this evening is Jules Marquez, a senior student and member of JEFCO's very first high school GT program right here at Wheat Ridge High School. A program initiated by JAGC in 2006 and still thriving today. Hi, Jules. And you know, we always talk about we're doing this for students and for our schools and generation after generation, but we never really get them involved. And it's time that we did that. I encourage every person here who's a member of a committee, of a commission, of an association to bring in the opinion of who you're doing this for. We do this in business in terms of customer feedback, but these are our customers. And so we need to ask them, are we doing it right? And what else do we need to be doing? Social media, parents, professionals, and as well as students in the GT program. Our format tonight will be somewhat flexible with questions provided not only from Jules and myself, but from the audience with no particular order. We're not going to go through our questions and ask you if you have. If you have a question, put your hand up, walk up to that live mic right here. Let's have it. That's what we're all about. So let's get started. We're going to do a 2-minute introduction from everybody, starting on our far left. Yeah?
Yeah, do you want me to use the microphone, or can you guys hear?
Let's use the microphone, it's easier.
Like there's no response, I'm assuming I'm silent. All right, good evening everyone. My name is Stephanie Schooley and I am running for the JEFCO Board of Education, representing District 3. I am a JEFCO parent. I have 2 girls. I was about to say little girls, but they're not that little anymore. One in 3rd grade at Stober Elementary School and one in 6th grade at Everett Middle School. Running for the Board of Education is really the culmination of lived experience for me that has kind of followed the ethic that I hold very dear to me around educational equity. I went to graduate school for conflict resolution after working in DPS at a school that had elementary school that had a GT center. When they pulled the GT center out of that school's kind of ratings in DPS dropped to the very bottom for performance for students. And then the district came in and closed it down to reopen it, and it caused so much conflict in the community in which that school was situated that it was a super valuable lesson to me and really spurned my desire to make sure that there are diverse voices at the table when we're making these kinds of decisions that impact not just our kids, but neighbors and families. So I ended up going to get my graduate work degree in conflict resolution. I've participated in the district at a number of levels in a volunteer capacity, namely on the PTA in my kids' school. When they were both at Stober, I was the co-president of that school during a time in which there were some difficult conversations happening around school closure possibilities. And we really served as a convener for not just parents at the school, but for neighbors, for local business owners, for the local neighborhood association, to be able to come together and help articulate to the Board of Education what it is that makes our schools thriving and successful places. And that was also a big opportunity for us to get those diverse voices at the table that may not have been part of that conversation before. I went from there and served on the District Accountability Committee and the Unified Improvement Planning Subcommittee, which was an awesome way to be able to think about performance and think about all of the data that's coming into the district and what resources we're putting into schools, and think very strategically around how we recommend that funding look when it goes to the Board of Education. I've served on a number of nonprofit boards and have spent the past 20 years of my life working in higher education. I am the executive director of a group called Campus Compact. And to me, budgets are a statement of priorities, of values. And I see this in the way that I have held my own organization accountable to funding things that matter, and would like to bring that same sort of ethic to the Board of Education for JEFCO. I also believe in the practice and have had 20 years of experience in the practice of collaboration. So bringing people together to have difficult conversations, to make sure those perspectives are at the table so that we can bring the very best ideas forward for our kids when there may not necessarily be one right answer. I would be honored to serve on the Board of Education, and I thank you for showing up tonight. It matters a lot that you guys are here.
Thank you.
So thank you, JAGC, for hosting this tonight, and thank you everybody that showed up. My name is Rob Applegate, and I'm running for Jefferson County Board of Education. I have 2 kids in Jeffco schools. My oldest went through Welchester Elementary and is now in the iSTEM program at Bell Middle School. He's been identified gifted talented and has been on ALP for quite a while. My younger son is in his 2nd year at Norma Anderson Preschool, so I will be invested in Jeffco schools for many years to come. I was raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, sometimes leaving for work before I was up, and often coming home after I had fallen asleep. I started working when I was 14. I wasn't sure I was going to go to college, but fortunately found the Colorado School of Mines, where I earned an undergrad in engineering physics and a PhD in applied physics. With that background, I feel like I know how to do research, look at all sides of the issues, and come to the best possible outcomes. I served as the Watchdogs coordinator at my son's school, was a member of the PTA, and served on the Golden Schools Foundation, a nonprofit organization that supports Golden Articulation Area schools. With Stover being my neighborhood school, I was upset when the district lifted the moratorium on school closures. Pleasant View Elementary was a Golden area school and was part of the Golden Schools Foundation. And it was the only school that was closed last time they were closing schools. It was a Title I school with over 65% free and reduced lunch in a less affluent area than some of the other schools that were up for closing. In a community where stability may be hard to come by, Pleasant View was a foundation in that community. Some of those parents were in very similar situations as my mom was when I was little, and wouldn't have been able to take off work and rally to save their schools. I'll always seek a balance and will work together, input from all stakeholders in the community, educators, administrators, support staff, students, parents, and the 70% of Jeffco households that don't have any kids in the school system. All voices are important and add value, and I'm asking for your vote, so please vote Rob Applegate this November. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Susan Miller, and first of all, I'd like to thank JAGC for hosting this event this evening. It's great to be with people who are passionate about gifted education. I'd like to briefly tell you about my background and why I'm running for Jeffco School Board. I began my career in finance, where I rated municipal bonds. I then moved into banking and today work for a firm that advises school districts across the nation on enrollment, facility planning, financing, and project management. But my most important job is being a mom. I have 4 children navigate Jeffco schools, including Kiffin Elementary, Creighton and Evergreen Middle School, Lakewood and Wheat Ridge High Schools. And like many of you, I volunteered. I chair the Wheat Ridge Accountability Committee and continue to serve on that committee today. I was president of PTSA here at Wheat Ridge High School, and I served on numerous committees at the district level, including Diversity Council and the Choice Committee. And for 6 years, I was honored to be president of Jefferson Association for Gifted Children, where we engaged in nonpartisan, evidence-based advocacy for gifted and twice exceptional special ed students at the local and state level. There are 3 main reasons I'm running for school board, but for now, I'll discuss just one. So let me ask all of you a question. How many of you worry about your children's future in the 21st century economy? Today, every parent I know is worried about this. Jeffco's achievement results clearly show we can do a better job meeting this challenge. Let me cite a few pieces of evidence. They say that up to 3rd grade, students are learning to read, and after that, they are reading to learn. But in Jeffco last year, on the 2019 CMAS, 75% of Jeffco 3rd graders eligible for free and reduced lunch didn't meet state literacy standards. If you can't read well, it's really hard to keep up, and it's also extremely hard for teachers to change the student task. I know we can do better, we have to do better, and I've seen it done right here at Wheat Ridge High School, where 50% of the students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. They were delivered outstanding achievement growth and innovative career technical education programs. I know we can do this. If you elect me, I'll laser focus on improving achievement results for all of our children, for their 21st century future. I ask for your vote, Susan Miller, on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Good evening. First, I'd like to acknowledge the work that Susan has done around GT within the district and also statewide. It's great to have champions like Susan for GT kids, for all kids. My name is Joan Chavez Lee, and I am seeking your support for my candidacy to represent District 4 on the Jefferson County Board of Education. As a former Jeffco teacher and principal, and as a Jeffco parent and now proud grandparent, I bring a vast wealth of experience and perspective to this position. I've been involved with Jeffco Public Schools since 1987, when my daughter Rosa began kindergarten at Mulholm Elementary School. At that time, as a single parent raising 2 kids, I quickly learned the incredible importance of quality education for my children. I also saw the power of positive, productive, and respectful relationships among all members of my school community. It's very important to me that Jeffco promotes an environment where inclusive community involvement occurs at the school level as well as at the district level. When I became a single parent, I finished my undergraduate degree in anthropology from the University of California at Santa Barbara. Then, encouraged by mentors in Jeffco schools, I enrolled at UCD to become a teacher and then a principal. I taught at 3 elementary schools in grades kindergarten through 5th. And then I was a principal at 2 elementary schools, Russell Elementary and Mulholm, and I finished my career at Wheat Ridge Middle School. At Wheat Ridge Middle School, I was really proud to help establish the first twice exceptional gifted class in Jeffco. Certainly we were concerned about the number of unidentified gifted students in the Jefferson area, so this helped with that process. In all my roles in the school district, I have been an advocate for students, for all kids. I want to be able to bring that commitment and experience to the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So we're going to go to our first question, and we'll start on this side of the table now. And
Make it an easy one.
and it's going to be 2 minutes per answer, please. So we'll start with this one. With 80% of gifted students sitting in neighborhood versus center schools, how will you help in making sure GT students are assured of the same resources in schools where principals do not support GT programs?
I honestly believe that shouldn't happen at all. Principals need to support the learning of all students in their school. And it's incumbent upon principals to be aware of the number of GT kids that are in their school and to be aware that they're an important process in the whole way that we can bring resources to teachers around the needs of our GT kids, to be part of the ALP process, also sit in on those meetings. So I think that as principals or as me as a school board member really need to advocate for the needs of GT kids, to say that it's not okay for principals, honestly, to not serve the needs of all kids. I think sometimes that GT kids are kind of forgotten about. People think that they're just going to get on with it because they're so smart, and that's not necessarily true. I was at schools that had really high free and reduced lunch programs, so we had quite a few kids in need. They got a lot of remediation, a lot of money went to them, but the equal amount of money needs to be spent around the needs of our GT kids. It's very important. That's what I would advocate for.
Thank you.
The board is challenged for being a governance board. It is not to be in the business of management. And so from a governance perspective, we are to be holding accountable the administration for the work that is done, not only in GT Center schools, but across all the district. So when we look at the growth of GT students, a majority, as you cited earlier, are within our neighborhood schools. And we can be looking at best practices. There's acceleration that's involved, and we know that we get the greatest boom for our buck with the acceleration programs. We could be looking and encouraging our administrators to be doing the best practices. We have a GT director who I know works faithfully for all children. But there is that accountability that our children should not be lagging the state. Our kiddos deserve the right to grow every single day, as does every child in Jefferson County schools. And so that's an equity issue for GT kids, for special ed children, for the twice exceptional children. All children deserve to grow full year's growth every year. And that's on the leadership at the administration level, at the government, at the district level, all the way down to the school level. It is the responsibility of that leader, and that's who we should be holding accountable for the growth and outcomes of our GT children.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Of course. With 80% of gifted students sitting in neighborhood versus center schools, how will you help in making sure GT students are assured of the same resources in schools where principals do not support GT programs?
So, as I said in my opening statement, my son was identified as gifted and talented. And we had the option to send him to a center program, and ultimately chose to leave him at his neighborhood school on an ALP. And had he gone to the center program, he would have automatically been a year ahead in math. Whereas now, staying in his neighborhood school on the ALP, he's ultimately behind his peers that had he gone to the center program, he would have been on par with. So really, you know, as the board needs to look at these issues, they need to drive the policy and make sure that the kids that choose, or parents that choose to keep their kids at the neighborhood schools, the 80% that are at the neighborhood schools, whether, you know, they chose to go there or whether they just can't, you know, get their kids to a center program, need to be on par with those kids that are at the center program. Whether that's, you know, training teachers more in how to identify and how to teach towards kids with ALPs, or ultimately giving them more support. You know, a teacher with 4 kids on ALPs has a lot less workload than a teacher with 15 kids on ALP. So, you know, how do you support that teacher with more kids on ALPs? And really that comes down, again, to the board and driving that policy so that all kids, whether they're at their neighborhood school on an ALP or at a center program in the GT program, have equal opportunity and equal growth and equal opportunity for success throughout their career.
Thank you.
We're going to jump rope at some point with this thing. So I'd like to answer this in 2 parts. The first one is that if there are schools where parents feel like principals are not supportive of GT students, then that is a concern that needs to be brought up in collaboration with the district director of GT, in coordination with parents and leadership at that school. I have not had that experience at all, and just want to share a story of how this can work really well and how GT students can be very well supported and ably supported through their neighborhood schools. Both of my daughters are identified GT. One is on an ALP at Stober Elementary, the other one is in the GT Center at Everett Middle School. And I have seen at Stober the instructional practices that best support GT students, but really can be applied to all different types of learners, such as acceleration of those students, curriculum compacting, grouping, and pull-out instruction. And I know in conversations with leadership at my kids' school, when there was any sort of doubt about the growth of high-performing, high-achieving students, there was immediate action taken to form new ways of educating those kids to make sure that they stayed accelerated, that they made sure that those kids were achieving and learning at their pace based on those kids' needs. And I think that that model we can build on. We can build on the best practices of what's working in our schools, because there are a lot of success stories there, and that we can build that so that we're serving our GT students well, regardless of what program and what school they choose to go through for their educational experiences. Am I keeping this?
Good.
What?
No, you still have time if you want.
No. I answer what I answer, and then I move on. Okay.
So for my first question, I'd like to ask, how do you feel about public education versus charter schools?
What is the order that we're answering?
Start from that side.
Awesome, all right. I feel like all students that attend Jeffco schools are a priority for Jeffco schools. And then we should address the needs of those students equally across whatever institution they go to as part of Jeffco schools. They are our students.
So first and foremost, charter schools are public schools, so they need to be supported similarly to district-run schools or neighborhood schools or however you want to define it. But charter schools are usually founded around either a specific educational principle or parents that are looking for something specific in some sort of educational area. So there's already strong parent involvement in charter schools, and that needs to be fostered and continued, and the district needs to support that, and not, it shouldn't be charter schools versus district-run schools when we're all public schools and we're all on the same side trying to get the best education for our children, no matter what the parents decide is best for their children.
I'm a huge advocate for choice. I believe that parents have every right to decide where to send their child, be it a public charter school, a neighborhood school, a center program, a homeschool, any type of environment where they find that their child is going to thrive is critical. That's their choice. A couple years ago, or probably 3 or 4 years ago actually, there was a lot of noise in the district about charter schools and equity, and I think they're just really kind of put rifts among all of us in the Jeffco world. And so when I was asked actually to be on a charter board, I jumped at the chance because I wanted to find out what all the noise was about. And a couple of people that I knew had moved from one school that was not serving their children, and they went to this charter school, and they asked me if I would consider at least applying to be a community member, and I did. And I found that those parents are just as passionate as I was when I sent my children to the Kiffins and the Creightons and Evergreens and Wheat Ridges and Lakewoods of the world. They were just as passionate as I was. The teachers were just as passionate as the teachers in our schools. So I really believe that we need to be focusing on what is best for our Jeffco students, what is best for the child first and foremost, and focus on that. And then what is best then for us to be supportive in that, for those parents, and how we can actually have them get access to the programs that they need. That's the big challenge, right, is equity of access. How easy is it? 43% of us are traveling around Jeffco from one school to another trying to find the best programs for our children. And other parents don't have that ability to get those children to the programs that they would like. So that is my focus, is the equity of access of programs that parents want for their children.
Like as was being said earlier, that our charter schools are public schools here in Jeffco. And the role of charter schools, as well as neighborhood and option schools, are to provide parents with choices that might best suit the learning needs of their own kids. I chose that my daughter would go to an option school. And option schools are wonderful. They've been here forever. They are all organically grown. My daughter was the kind of learner in which Jefferson County Open School was important for her because she had some really gifts in certain areas, and the school itself allowed her to develop those gifts. Even allowed her some time to pursue. She was a competitive equestrian. She did hunter-jumper classes, but as well as acting there. So there are places that are really important for kids, and I think, like Susan was saying, it's really how do we make sure that all our kids have the opportunity to access a choice school if it's available in the district. If that means maybe developing more kind of programs within the school, like at Rose Stein, where my granddaughter goes to school. She's in an IB school, it's preparing itself for an IB school, or even at the Peak Expeditionary School. That are opportunities in local areas for kids to go that might best suit their needs. So I don't see that there are only choices between neighborhood schools and charter schools. They shouldn't be at odds with each other. They should be available for all parents to understand and know about, so that they can really make those choices for their kids.
GT Center schools are growing and accommodating an influx of newly identified students. Wheat Ridge has been fortunate to attract families from down south in Littleton all the way to Evergreen for its GT program. Will you support opening a GT Center high school in South? Start.
Yes. Well, speak to the needs we were just talking about. Being able to provide that opportunity for kids to be able to go fairly close in this big, huge district, to have them meet their needs, have teachers meet their needs.
Once again, that comes down to leadership and the belief by the leaders within a school that that is a need for students. So for example, here at Wheat Ridge, with the student-based budgeting, we faced the challenge of, was this district going to continue to support the center school with the funding formula for Wheat Ridge, or was it going to be on the back of the Wheat Ridge school through the student-based budgeting? I'm not going to get into all the discussion about that, but suffice it to say, the district decided that it was best to go with the student-based budgeting. And so when you ask if I support a school down in the south for a center program for the high school, absolutely I support that, as I would up in the mountains, as I would up at Stanley Lake, as I would anywhere where our children their pathways for GT centers from elementary to middle to high school. But that means that the leadership of all of those schools has to be willing to accept those children with the student-based budgeting that's coming in the door and commit to have those center programs, commit to have those teachers that are trained for GT centers, and honor that the secondary GT pathway is going to be different structure than the elementary school pathway.
I think I'll have to echo what Susan said, but absolutely there should be GT Center programs available to kids, that aren't just in the urban areas, aren't just in the north part of Jeffco where the population centers seem to be, similar to Warren Tech South that they're trying to put down there that hopefully will be built someday. Those kids need access to, and there should be a GT Center program down there if they can do that, yes.
Thanks. I think that need determines action, and if there is a need for us to be able to provide opportunities for our students to be successful, and if that's a specific group of students that needs to have access to educational instruction in the south part of town or north or wherever it is, that's a conversation that needs to happen to be able to look at what is the actual influx of students, where is that need the greatest, and then be able to make that a budget priority moving forward.
Thank you.
So usually when I'm struggling socially and or emotionally, I go to Mr. Holm and Ms. Lee. And so what do you plan on doing to provide an outlet of support for future and or present GT students and schools?
Sorry, lovely voice, it's so soft, it's hard to hear. I think that the district has done a wonderful job in allocating funds from 5A to increase the number of social emotional learning specialists that are in our schools, and that trend of providing that kind of support and other mental health supports to students needs to be a priority. We have heard over and over again about the influx and the rise in students that are reaching out with critical mental health issues and other needs for support that are happening within the schools. So I would encourage that continued focus for spending The other piece is opening up and thinking about partnerships around mental health and social emotional supports for students that exist in our communities, whether it's through an entity like the Jefferson Mental Health Services that are partnering with the district, other nonprofit or government entities, to be able to really leverage the best of what's in our community and bring those resources to the table so that we can think creatively about how we best support students, particularly students that are in crisis.
It's a horrible statistic, but GT boys are the highest suicide rates among high school students. And GT students in general definitely need support emotionally as well as educationally. I know the district has started increasing, support for those students, and I think that is definitely good. I also echo the fact that, getting involved in the community, reaching out to organizations such as Judy's House. Judy's House provides grief counseling to families and actually comes into Bell Middle School, where my son goes to school, and works with students there that might have experienced a loss in their family and helps support them. So, not just inside the district, but reaching out into the community, into those nonprofits that have the expertise, have the research-based understanding of, how to deal with kids in crisis. I think that's very important. It needs to be explored more.
We know that GT children, as they grow up, they're very aware over excitabilities, the sensitivities that they have. Certainly, you are fortunate here at Wheat Ridge High School to have two teachers that you are able to go to and talk with. And there is also the discussion about the high level now of suicide rates in Jefferson County that are increasing over the years. We know that there are issues with children that have chronic and trauma, acute issues that are not being addressed. And I would say that as children are navigating through the education system and as they continue on and they realize when they get to high school they're not able actually to access high school work, access the expectations that we have for them academically, you can understand why there would be frustration and depression and rage and anxiety, and that percolates, I think, through our schools. I think we hired SELs, about 114 social emotional learner counselors, which I think was great. That's helpful, but I really believe that we should have allocated additional dollars at the high school secondary level for trained psychologists and for trained counselors that really have to deal with those children that are in the high schools right now, that are dealing with the stresses, that are dealing with what's going to happen when I go out into the world. We know that people are focusing on climate change. We know that people are focusing on overpopulation. We know how those sensitivities rise in our children. And so I think we need to be thoughtful about how we actually deploy dollars at the secondary level with licensed psychologists and for those children that are really in the acute need spaces.
So I think it's important within a classroom itself that the teacher really seeks to have an understanding of students' stories, and it helps with their connection to that student, helps for actually figuring out how best to teach students there. So I'm glad that you have that really nice connection with some teachers here. That's really important. My background again is around, I'm thinking around the twice exceptional class that we had at Wheat Ridge Middle School. I can tell you that the training for teachers around specific needs for all GT kids is really important. In fact, the teacher that we selected did not work out because she had come from a more traditional GT classroom and didn't really understand how a lot of the kids in my school kind of brought these other things with them. So they would get frustrated really quickly, or they could just kind of be angry about things. What we did at Wheat Ridge Middle School is use not only our counselors, but also we had an on-site Jefferson Center for Mental Health therapist there, which was really helpful for some of the kids in that lab. I think that really I think it's great that we're having the SEL learning specialists, the social emotional learning specialists there on school sites. I think that they need specific training about GT kids, and specifically about some of the things that kind of come up fairly regularly for GT kids, whether it is just the anxiety they have, feeling they have to perform at the best level all the time, or whether they're just kind of the kid that knows a lot but doesn't perform really well. I just think that the more that we can, as adults and professionals that surround GT kids, know their story, know how to best relate to them, the better it will be for the kids in classrooms.
Thank you.
So we've had a few specific questions, person specific. So we'll start from this side. Joan, as a previous principal, do you believe that, is it financially, socially, does it just make sense for GT students to be sent automatically to a GT center school? Could we pool in resources better? Or does it make more sense to leave it as is with 80% of our students being in neighborhood schools?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think there are different pathways to identify GT kids. So if you're talking about, that the kids who are on the 95th percentile of those cognitive tests then qualify for GT services that way, that's important that they're in a situation where they're really being challenged to do their best all the time. But there are other ways, that the talent aptitude pathway around kids who have a talent in the arts, in even sometimes athletics. Those are kids that can stay at their school, their home school. I mean, I would hope that we can provide both in the district. It's very important we provide both, because sometimes a neighborhood school will help with socialization, and understanding of the whole world a little bit better, I think, than being possibly isolated within a GT program. So I think we need to continue to provide all those avenues, as well as things that are just beginning. I was very excited today to understand that we're providing GT online classes for middle school kids. That's wonderful, and gives a way that we can have those opportunities pertain to all kids at all schools.
Thank you. Susan, question for you. You recently co-wrote an article about Jeffco's GT program that got some negative reviews. Will you please elaborate and tell us what changes you would support?
Got negative reviews? We were asked by Thomas Ford Foundation to write an article that compared the GT program and identification and advocacy from a Calgary, Alberta perspective to Jefferson County, Colorado, or basically Colorado statewide. We found that the difference between Alberta, Canada, and down here was that the advocacy actually does take place at the parent level up in Canada, where they have the program called the Code 80, where those children that are identified, those parents know exactly what type of programming they're going to be receiving from those schools. They know exactly how those programs are going to be working, and that those parents know that those teachers are going to be held accountable, and the principals will be held accountable as well. What we find down here is that the advocacy is very different. We have parents at the local level, like the JAGCs, or like Denver, or like Douglas County. They have parent advocacy groups. But what is controlled at the state level is more by administrators and more by directors from those different districts. And that's fine, and that's great, but at the end of the day, it's parents' voices that are critical to be at those tables. It's parents' voices that need to be saying, this is what we need. When we had the ESSA challenge down here, where GT was not even hardly mentioned at all, I don't know how many times, there was a couple of us from JAGC that went to the CAGT meetings, the Colorado Association for Gifted Talented, and asked them to address GT in the ESSA Every Student Succeeds Act. It was quiet, nothing was done. JAGC had to advocate for us to have the opportunity to have gifted actually written into the ESSA for Colorado. We had people that went down and testified before the state. And because of JAGC's parents that wrote, they actually did put more into the ESSA for GT than we would have had. And that's because parents advocated. That's because it was parents' voices. And when we have parents' voices rise up, we have more power because we're the voters. We're the ones who are actually asking and demanding best outcomes for our children. So yes, I do advocate for parents to have the voices at the state level, at the national level, advocating for what is best for our children.
Thank you. Robert? How do you equate and differentiate gifted and special education as the same? How do you advocate and differentiate the two?
Gifted and talented education is a type of special education just by definition. The fact that it's not the norm, you know, it's exceptional students, just like special needs kids have special needs. The gifted kids need a different type of education, whether that's through an ALP or whether that's through, you know, a center program. So, you know, it's less about, you know, differentiating them, but more about, you know, what do those specific needs, or what do those kids specifically need for each type of education. So, I mean, I guess I'm not totally sure how to answer that, other than, you know, gifted and talented education is a type of special education, and gifted and talented kids need extra, whether it's through an ALP or through a center program, just like special needs or special education kids might need more through, you know, some special help within their school days.
Thank you. Stephanie? How would you say the community defines gifted and talented, and how would you promote our advanced learners?
I think that there is a sort of false divide sometimes when folks are identified, especially when kids are identified or when parents are talking about, I'll speak to my own community, what the needs of their students are. I think that through the district's process, which I'm excited to see shifting to a talent pool model of thinking about gifted and talented identification in a way that allows for the diversity of our communities to be represented and the diversity of GT pools, that those are critical steps to take so that throughout our community there is an understanding by parents and by neighborhoods, by community partners, that gifted and talented students, just like special education students, just like any other students in our schools, represent the spectrum of our communities. And I think that moving toward this talent pool model and moving toward a way in which we can more equitably identify GT learners, GT students, will help open up that conversation with increased groups of parents to be able to better understand who GT learners are, and that they're within all of our communities, not sort of a subset that is other people's children.
Thank you.
Am I keeping it?
So for my question, well, to start off, specifically at this program, my fellow peers and I in the GT program have always had to fundraise for certain events that, you know, matter to us. And what I'm wondering is, what are you planning, or how do you plan on budgeting for future GT process?
So I believe strongly in bringing an equity lens to the way in which the district makes funding decisions and the way in which the district provides governance. And I think that at a base level, we need to make sure that all students in JEFCO are receiving equitable funding, given that the funding is what it is, so that we can provide equal opportunities for learning. That being said, I also feel like there are opportunities to think creatively, whether it's through bringing community partners to the table, bringing local funders to the table, having conversations around some of the innovations and some of the programming that we can really scale and enhance, to be able to resource and fund in a way that's outside maybe of student-based budgeting, programs and students, particularly if it's student-led engagement efforts and extra stuff, so that we can bring other voices to the table and increase the way in which our communities understand the needs for the support that our school needs, both fiscally and in volunteer time and mentoring time, so that we have those pathways for students to be able to explore all of the ways in which they want to engage in their communities.
Same question? Or, as far as, fundraising for your specific projects and stuff like that, my son just got the butter braid thing, so that's already on Facebook today. So if anyone wants to buy butter braids for Norman Anderson Preschool, please feel free. But ultimately, it comes down to smart budgeting and smart finances. And with a research background, with a numbers background, I feel like I can bring that to the board. The budget has increased for this year $62 million when there's only an extra $43 million coming in. Someone needs to look at that and figure out what's going on. When they closed Pleasant View and they moved a charter school in there, the district took on $11 million of new debt that they didn't have to take on, that could have been budgeted for teacher raises or for special projects that people in the community might be more interested in. So really it comes down to smart budgeting and smart decisions to make sure that there are resources for things that are important and things that are needed, like paying teachers more, like different projects and different things that work within the community.
Can we stay on this question?
Yes, please.
When we talk about special ed and gifted and talented, they are both under the umbrella of the Exceptional Children's Education Act. And dollars and funds go directly to special ed for the purpose of, from federal dollars and state dollars that are directed specifically for the purpose of special ed. The money that is allocated for GT goes for resource teachers, which are critical. It goes for our director, which is critical. But there isn't really funding for gifted and talented. There isn't really a pool of money that comes from the state or comes from the federal government. It's really on the back of Jefferson County. A substantial amount is on the back of Jefferson County. So when we are 12% of our student population is identified as gifted and talented, I think we need to be having a thoughtful conversation about, as people have already mentioned, the allocation of resources. How are we allocating those resources? How are we earmarking them? And every year, I think all of us sit at the budget time and we watch the board come up and it says we have a total of $30 million or $35 million to talk about this year. This is what we get to talk about out of $1 billion budget. And I think that's where we need to be starting to have the conversations. What are our priorities? Our priorities are the children. Our priorities are the students. Our priorities are the teachers in the classroom. Those should be our priorities. And how do we take that $1 billion budget and how do we find dollars that actually can go more into the classroom to honor the different students that we have in the classrooms? So I do think if it is a priority for our community to provide additional opportunities for our gifted children, then that is something that we, as a board, need to be asking our administration to be doing. And how do we find those dollars? And I think we have to have a very thoughtful, in-depth, cost evaluation, return on our investment. What are we getting for what we are putting into programs? That, for example, we have a one-to-one Chromebook program that we're rolling out. Don't really know how much that's going to cost over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Don't know what the outcomes are going to be. Don't really have the expectation of what we should be seeing with the one-to-one Chromebooks with our children. But we're investing money in that. And we need to be thinking about thoughtfully, are we investing wisely, having measurements, holding our community, holding our administration, our leadership accountable. And if we aren't doing that, if it's not working, then we have to pivot and find another way to find dollars to go into programs that we value as a community.
I think we also need to really think about the fact that Jefferson County is the 37th biggest school district in the United States. It's as big as Rhode Island for area. It's big and complex. The money, the majority of the money in the budget goes to teacher salaries, bottom line. I think we are underfunded statewide in education, and we have been for a long time. So definitely that is something I think school board members need to advocate and address and talk about, and how it affects kids in the classroom. It makes me sad that you have to do fundraisers to fund events, but I do know that that occurs at many different levels in schools. I think that there are great examples of that here at Wheat Ridge High School. I'm familiar with the STEM program because I'm a member of the Kiwanis Club of Wheat Ridge, and we financially support the STEM program as well as some other programs in school. I think that they do some wonderful things. I mean, they have community connections for just finances, for money, as well as those connections with companies that actually give them things to help with their design, and it's kind of amazing. How to translate that to other fundraising opportunities is important. I think that there are maybe lessons to be learned around that fundraising, lessons for kids to learn how to advocate for themselves. But definitely, I think bottom line is that we do not have enough money for education. It's always important to really look at budgets and to see if they're working. But I can tell you, one of my biggest frustrations around school districts, and this is me coming from a school that was about 97% free and reduced lunch, so one of the most impacted schools in the district, is that if you start something new, let's say the one-to-one technology piece, and you do not give it time to actually have teachers implement and then come to a place where they can reflect on it, then it's just kind of spinning in circles around being able to keep it and see if it's worked. So I didn't really answer the question I did. So again, I think you shouldn't have to do fundraising, but I think there's some opportunities there, learning opportunities when you do that.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience being texted, I guess. But if there's questions out there, feel free to come up to the mic and ask. Does anybody have any questions?
I have two if I can ask, but I'll start with one. My name is Leonor, so thank you tonight for all of you for running. I think that's a big commitment, so I appreciate that. Interesting, I was at the last forum as well, and our superintendent class said that the new board is going to have some big decisions in regards to the number of small schools in Jefferson County because enrollment is low. How would you address the process of going through that discussion of potentially closing schools, and what variables would you look at? Because I personally was really disappointed when Pleasant View was closed with so little discussion. So how would you approach that differently?
Sure, and I can tell you a story that occurred at Wheat Ridge Middle School. At that time, there was a list of possible school closures in the district that the district had formulated through time, looking at things like student enrollment, building capacity, whether just the building maintenance, because we had a lot of schools that are older. Suddenly, without any notice, two of the school board members decided to put our school on the closure list. That was going to be decided in less than 2 weeks. So I know what one shouldn't do around school closure. That was so destructive for my school, for my parents, for teaching staff. if this is going to happen, it needs to happen with a thoughtful, respectful, well-communicated process in which the district goes out of their way to hear as many voices as possible, as many community voices as possible. But it can't be done suddenly, and saying things like, well, we had a meeting but people didn't attend, that's not good enough. I think that really there needs to be a lot of outreach into the community around possible school closures.
I believe before we quote-unquote go off the moratorium, the board needs to be talking with the superintendent and administration, because it is the board's decision about whether or not schools will close. It's not the superintendent's decision. It's not the administration's decision. The board has to make that decision. So I believe the board needs to be having those conversations with the community directly. What are our values? What are the critical things we need to be thinking about? How do we go about talking with the communities that are looking at smaller and smaller enrollments? What that impact would be for those communities? What are our values? What's important to us? So that the community truly does have a voice in the conversation, has a voice sitting at the table to talk about the policies that the board should actually put in place, so that there is not, oh, this just happened to one school, couldn't possibly happen to another school, or this school has a louder voice than this school. We need to really be thinking about, we have declining enrollment in Jefferson County. We're not a growing bedroom community in Denver. Denver's losing children as well, slowly but surely. So these are going to be conversations that are going to have to be ongoing and have to happen in the open, in light of all that we know is happening at the schools in the mountains, down here in the Wheat Ridge and Golden area, and down south that has growth pressures. Those are policies that need to be happening at the board level now, with the community's input. Not over 2 or 3 days or 5 days at a board meeting when people are wearing t-shirts and saying, save our schools. That's way past the time. They should be happening before we even talk about going out and closing schools.
So schools aren't just, educating the kids. They're foundations of the community. And Pleasant View specifically was a foundation for that community. The Golden Backpack Program gave food to kids on Friday afternoons that they could take home so they could eat, on the weekends. At the holidays, they had a giving tree so people in the community could give gifts to those kids who might not be getting Christmas or Hanukkah presents. So really, we need to meet the people where they are. We need to go into the community and ask them, what does this school mean to you and how can we keep it open? Or if the board and the district needs to have that difficult decision and needs to make that difficult decision to close a school, what are the policies and how are the parents, going to deal with that? The board needs to direct the policies and make sure there's a consistent policy across the district so parents aren't surprised. So, it's not 6 months later and they need to organize everybody they can when maybe they don't have the resources to do that to try to save their school. So from the board level, it comes down to engaging the community where they are, not asking them specifically to come to board meetings, and going out there, meeting them, and asking their opinions, and then ultimately coming up with a policy that benefits everybody, or at least doesn't surprise people and doesn't hurt people disproportionately across the district.
This is a topic near and dear to my heart after experiencing a lot of processes and community events that I feel like for the Stober community really helped us to advocate for the role of schools as way more than solely places that educate our students. They're anchors within our communities. For Stober, it is the only park that's in our neighborhood that you don't have to cross a busy street to get to. There's extracurricular activities, there's after school and before school care. So it's a lot more to our communities than solely the educational experiences of our students. I feel strongly that there needs to be a consistent and community-informed criteria for why and when we would close or consolidate a school. And that is a process that needs to begin probably before today, but that we can move forward with to be able to say, these decisions need to be made with the involved perspective of community members. So not just parents, but local business members, neighborhood associations, to be able to figure out what is that role that that school can play. I also, though, understand that it is a real challenge to have schools that have enrollment that is under a certain threshold. It makes it difficult for teachers to have the sort of instructional teams and instructional support that they really need to be able to provide everything that all the learners in their classrooms need. Obviously, there's some fiscal ramifications to that, but none of those things are priority over understanding what is the criteria that we would use, what is the evidence base for that, what are best practices that have happened in districts across the country that have faced this same type of declining enrollment, and what does the future look like when we think about the role that those schools, whether it's repurposed like Pleasant View was to Peak Expeditionary, and that being such a thriving school and such a high growth school at this point. What are the ways in which we can think innovatively about decisions we make about our school facilities moving forward?
Thank you. Here's an easy one. Do you support arming teachers and school resource officers? Just easy.
Okay, I do not support arming teachers, and I trust JEFCO safety and security to make decisions about what's best for their policies and procedures around other stuff. But no, for classroom teachers and educators.
Yeah, I don't support arming teachers. Resource officers is a different issue entirely. They're trained professionals, and if you've got training, then you could be, able to carry a gun, but teachers, no.
I think John McDonald has done a great job putting in place hardening targets within Jefferson County. We're a national leader in that space, and I think we need to stay a national leader in that space. That doesn't mean arming teachers. That means focusing on how we harden our targets. It means how we try to lessen the need for children who go to do harm. How do we address that in our schools with the SELs, with our social emotional learning, with engaging kiddos, but we don't need to put that burden on teachers by any stretch of the imagination. They've got more on their plate and more on their plate and more on their plate, and they don't need that at all. And I think the SROs, we know exactly what their roles and responsibilities are, and they're trained. They go through extensive training for that very purpose, so I support whatever John McDonald believes is best for those different schools and his SROs and where he places them. I am a supporter.
I do not support arming teachers, and whatever everybody else said was correct. I mean, definitely we have continuing reflection on our school safety measures in Jefferson County, and I really appreciate that the district does that.
Thank you. One more from the audience. Would you support a 2E K through 8 school? You want to start on this side, John?
Well, I definitely supported a 2E classroom, beginning of that in Jefferson County. So I definitely think that there's a need to have those opportunities, the GT opportunities for kids who are twice exceptional within schools themselves.
I'm not exactly sure where that question is coming from. The twice exceptionalities of kiddos definitely is not addressed as fluidly as it could be. I think the challenge is, where do you put something like that? How do you get children to that place? And the teachers and the community. I know, though, that we have parents coming to the board on a regular basis, talking about the autism pathways that we kind of stop beyond elementary school and where we now go for below high school. And I understand there's conversations happening in that community about what could be in terms of a school that could feed those children as well. So I really need a better understanding of what it means to say, do you support a twice exceptional school? I know, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, we talked about starting a GT pathway school, and that's not really allowed under the state for starting a GT like Stargate any longer. So we'd have to talk about what that means then for a twice exceptional school, because that's GT as well as special education. So it's a multifaceted discussion, I think, about what can be and what could be and what's legal.
And I think it depends, similar to what Susan was saying, it depends on the need and where in the community, and, is there a building for it? Is it going with another school? I feel like this is a very broad question and needs much more research than a yes or no answer.
Yeah, I think that this would be a conversation, if it's important to a group of parents, to be able to bring up with the board, bring up with district staff, and have a conversation around what are the needs of the group of students, what would best serve their needs. I don't know enough about it to be able to answer this as a yes or no either, but I do know that as parents have concerns about the ways in which their students' needs are or are not being met, that this is all about collaboration, and that there should be board members and district staff that are willing to engage in those conversations to figure out what the best solutions are for kids.
Thank you. I think we have one more.
So this is a question addressing our budget. To summarize, I think some of you mentioned we have a $1 billion budget in Jefferson County. We just passed a $1 billion bond, and we just passed a $33 million mill levy. And I've heard a couple of you say that's still not enough. And honestly, I'm done with taxes. I'm taxed out. I can't afford it anymore. Now it's impacting my life, and I'm trying to save for college for my kids. So what other solutions do you have to address issues where it's adding programs for GT students or ASD students, or student-based budgeting, helping schools that are smaller? What are some of your solutions that work within a budget versus saying, well, we just need more money? I don't want to hear that. I want to hear what are some concrete ideas and solutions that you have. Thank you.
I'm super appreciative and worked for the 5A, 5B funding, which I know some people don't want to pay more taxes, but it is going to go to really concrete improvements for our buildings and for our instruction in schools. I also know that the district needs to be good stewards of that money, and that there is faith placed in the district through voters when they approve things like bonds and mill levy overrides. So part of it is prioritizing and making sure that the district's values are carried forward in its funding. I think also that there are incredible opportunities in a district that's the size that takes up all of Jefferson County to be able to think about partnerships and the ways in which collaboration across different industries through the nonprofit sector and health and human services can help to leverage some of the programs and practices and resources that our students really need. I know in my work in higher education, I work with 20 colleges and universities in Colorado and Wyoming, and a lot of the work that I do is trying to figure out how to provide not only training and technical assistance, but provide resources to faculty and staff who are wanting to engage students in community-based learning opportunities. And money always comes up as the #1 impediment for them to be able to do their job. Higher ed is not funded much better than K-12 in the state. And we work creatively together to bring community partners to the table, to bring businesses, local chambers of commerce to the table and say, what can we do together? If everyone is talking about sort of the deficit model, how can we go toward asset-based thinking and look at what are the assets that we have in our communities that can really meet some of the instructional needs of our kids, particularly as we think about JEFCO generations and a lot of the sort of applied learning and the generation skills that have to do with collaboration, critical thinking, working across difference. We can do a lot of that work in partnership with our communities, and I think that that is an untapped resource that I know the district has strong partnerships, but that can exponentially grow for our students' benefit.
So this comes down also to the 70% of families that don't have kids in Jeffco schools. You know, they're probably not going to want another property tax increase, especially if, you know, maybe their house is paid off, they're living on a fixed income. They're not going to want to have to decide whether or not they need to, you know, increase their taxes to help fund education. So ultimately it comes back down to smart budgeting. You know, not just what the money is being spent on, but are those programs working? You know, we just moved a bunch of kids from 5th grade into 6th grade into middle schools. You know, is that effective? Is that working? You know, was that worth the cost that the district took on? And I don't know the answer to that. You know, is there data around there that says this is working and this isn't working, and then stop spending money on stuff that isn't working and start spending money on the stuff that is working? So, you know, really it just comes down to smart budgeting. And there's always ways to find out what works better and what doesn't, and how to save money on things that don't.
So I think we've all touched on, or everybody knows in their head, that there is $1 billion budget that Jefferson County has, that additional mill levy has come in. That's been great for people that have the programs that they wanted, and there's security involved in that, technology, et cetera, and the voters said yes for that. They also said yes for putting money into our school buildings with average, 55, 60 years. Our FCIs, or the facility condition indexes, are not exceptional. So the community said, yeah, we're going to vote and we're going to put money into the buildings. But now we have the hard part. We have this wonderful thing called the Colorado Finance Project, that school funding formula, that is just a Gordian knot, right? You have Gallagher and Tinker, and they just don't get along very well at all. And so it really puts all of us in a very difficult bind, and every year we're going before the voters in some way, shape, or form to ask for, just give us $100 million. Just give us $900 million. Just give us $1 billion. And the voters have said, no, you need to figure out how to fix Tabor and Gallagher, because we don't trust enough to give you that money without saying what those dollars are going to be spent for, and how we're going to measure how those dollars are spent, and what the return on the investment is going to be. So let me just give you an example. There was a Mirage study that was done that looked at major large school districts across the country, and approximately $18,000 was spent on average per teacher per year, with no evidence whatsoever of improvement of achievement for children with that investment. So let's just say hypothetically, we took that number here in Jeffco, and I don't have that number definitively, so this is a hypothetical. But let's say we had $18,000 per teacher for professional development per year here in Jefferson County. 18,000 times about 4,700 people, teachers. That is $84.6 million. Now, that's not a gimme, that's not a guarantee, that's not necessarily sitting out there in some fund somewhere, but we don't even know how much money we spend per year on professional development in Jefferson County and what we get for it. We haven't even paid for professional development for our teachers for the one-to-one rollout of Chromebooks. We don't even have that set up yet. So I think as a board, I think we need to be asking those questions about where are these dollars being spent thoughtfully, and how our returns are coming forward. What are we getting for those investments? What's the achievement looking like? What are our CTE programs? What are our pathways looking like? How are we funding our GT programs? How are we meeting the needs of special ed children? All of those things. But that's a cost and benefit analysis that has to be done all through the budget. And I believe that's the role of the board. And I'm excited to get started with that.
As I've said before, I believe staff development is very important for all teachers in Jefferson County. I'm not sure we can take that away, the money away from staff development. Teachers, as I was a teacher, we're continuous learners. We want to get better in our practice, in our craft of teaching. Most big companies will also pay for staff development for their employees. When I was a geotech at an oil company, I took structural geology that my company paid for. So it's a common practice. I think it's almost too easy of an answer to use that as an example. The deal with achievement is that sometimes people only look at one data point. Being a principal at a highly impacted school, I knew there was lots of ways that kids achieved at the school, lots of different ways. I do believe, though, we do need to look to see how well our money is being spent. And that can be done at a district level, but also at a school level, and specifically for GT kids. A needs assessment should happen at the school to see things like how well are teachers prepared to teach GT kids, what kind of materials do we have here that will help GT kids. Those things do need to happen. I need to say that I am a supporter of Proposition CC. I appreciate the first line of that proposition, which states without raising taxes. So that is one way. I understand that it may seem an easy thing for me to say we need more money, but we need more money because we probably need more teachers. And that is the number one way that our budget's being spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Good evening. My name is Nancy. I have a daughter here at Blue Ridge, and my question has to do with the flexibility in meeting the graduation requirements. That was one of the big draws of why my daughter was here. Yet, in talking to other parents, I understand that that was not always the case at other secondary schools, or in the past, I've been told the district is saying this, and I reach out to the district and they seem to point back down to the school, that the school determines it, or I'm told there's a policy and I'm all over the website and I can't find the policy. So my question is I would like to know, would you foresee establishing a policy at the district level, a published policy that would encourage and enable students to meet the graduation requirements, but with flexibility? Because a lot of the GT kids would like some flexibility in meeting those graduation requirements. Thank you.
Yes, and I think it is important that the requirements are published and accessible for all parents. It shouldn't be a hard find to go on a website and find what the information you need. And I do know sometimes it is hard to find that information when we go to the website for Jeffco schools. I don't know exactly what the flexibility or examples that you were speaking about are in particular as it relates to your child or GT kids. Can you give me an example, please?
For example, would be MOOC classes, which are online. My daughter has done some of those, but to get that pre-approved, to know for sure it's going to end up on our transcript, to know for sure it's going to count towards graduation, has not been a trivial process.
So definitely that needs to happen, and it needs to be easy for a parent to determine if that occurs. It looks like that there are some issues with the communication, but definitely that's something that should occur for all kids if they have that opportunity. Should be something that will count if it meets the requirements through online classes, definitely.
So this is near and dear to my heart. I'm going to do two stories. One is a friend of mine has a kiddo who went through the mountain schools, and was not able to access geometry in 8th grade because, well, the schools up there just thought, in particular, you know, they're just not ready for geometry right now, and we really don't have a teacher to teach geometry, and so you're gonna have to take what we have in our schools. No offer to do it online, no offer to maybe, you know, do it through a different program. It was just, that's not gonna be on offer. So this kiddo was not able to do 8th grade geometry, therefore he was not able to access higher levels of math as he went through his program, and he couldn't do his level of, I think it's C physics. He had to have A, B, B, C calc and multivariable calc to do that course. And so he kind of missed out on that pathway because we just didn't have the right access up there, or the right leadership that understood how do we serve that child. It's not that we don't have it, it's how do we serve the child. And I'll give the example then of my own kiddo, who was going through here at Wheat Ridge and was flying fast with his math. They were able to give him the multivariable in his senior year. They figured out a way to make that happen. They also figured out, because he accelerated and he kind of went beyond his language arts levels here, that they gave him the opportunity to do a Mass Open Online course, which is the MOOC. And they gave him credit for that. They didn't give him an A, B, C, or D. It was a pass-fail, but they gave him credit, and he took ethics out of Duke, University of Duke, and then he took American poetry from University of Pennsylvania. Those were his 2 senior language arts classes. And we had to push for that because the alternative was for him to have to drive down to University of Denver or someplace, or go over to Red Rock, someplace else, and he was gonna have to miss cross-country because that's when they were gonna be offering those courses. So Wheat Ridge was flexible enough and gave him the opportunity to take those courses. My daughter also took independent study and got AP psychology. My other son graduated faster and graduated at 16 by taking an AP class online that Boulder USD gave to their kids. And we got the administration here at Denver West to say that that was fine. But she's right. There needs to be policies where any parent can go to say, hey, my kiddo needs this. How do we make that happen for the student? Because that's our competency. That's what Jeffco Schools is supposed to do, is take care of the students. Not to be worried about, oh, we can't get that done because we don't have a teacher here at that school. Well, how do we get it done then? How do we get access to that program that that little person needs? That's our job. So I do believe in flexibility and pathways, and they should be definitely clearly defined and have parents know what's available to them and how to make it happen.
So when you get your high school diploma, you should have a fundamental knowledge of certain things, but you might not be going to college, you might be going to trade school, you might be going straight into the work, employment field. So ultimately, the fundamental core of the high school diploma can come out of a single policy, and then the flexibility beyond that should be a greater policy within the district, whether you want to take independent study, whether you want to take the MOOC courses. The district could, if they haven't already, since you haven't found it and apparently other people haven't found it, have a single policy for this is what a high school diploma means, and then beyond that have the flexibility to say what else counts for your next studies or your next career or beyond that. So yes, I would agree that the district needs a policy around that, but also flexibility within the policies, and that needs to be easily accessible and easily known for the parents that might want to try different things.
Thanks. It is my vision that every student sees their future in Jeffco through high-quality college, career, and community readiness from early childhood through high school graduation. We know that when students are engaged in their learning, their attendance is better, the graduation rates rise, and they graduate better prepared to contribute to their communities, whether that is through going to college, through getting into the career field of their choice or exploring career fields, or engaging in their community through their faith-based institutions, through volunteerism. All of those things can be explored as they go through their experience in Jeffco, And that's really supported through Jeffco Generations as a strategic plan, as a sort of vision for what our kids can be doing, whether that's engaged internships, capstones, apprenticeships, volunteerism. All of those contribute to the skills that are outlined in Jeffco Generations, that in addition to content mastery, we want students who are able to work across difference, who can communicate with other people, who have strategic and critical thinking skills. Those are really best learned in applied settings, and there have to be ways in which our students can experience those things. I think one of the challenges, and this is a challenge in a district that is as large as Jeffco and where there's a lot of local control, is helping to translate district policy around those pathways into practice at the school level and providing the kind of professional development and support that our instructional leaders, that our staff and our educators need to be able to really understand how do we integrate that content mastery and what we want students to learn into the experiences they can have that really can cement some of those for them and allow them to have the flexibility to keep them engaged through to graduation, that translation into the school setting is critical so that it can be communicated to parents, so that students understand that those pathways exist, so that they can keep moving forward, whether it's for college, career, or some sort of community engagement experience.
Thank you. Thanks. We're getting to the end. I wanted to recognize the board members that joined us tonight. Thank you very much. Was there anything that you wanted to add tonight? Thank you. So let's close up with this last question. You can put in your closing words with this. So imagine that it's the last year of your term. You've been elected